Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. We are here today to talk about the 15 biggest creatures in Magic the Gathering. So, to make sure we're all on the same page and know exactly how the list is constructed, 1, we're not going to be including any sort of cards that aren't from regular Magic sets. So it's all black bordered stuff to make the top 15 list. And the size issue in terms of who's the biggest is based on a numerical standpoint. And what I mean by that is a 10-10 beats a 9-9, an 11-11 beats a 10-10, that sort of thing. That's how the rankings work. So keep that in mind when we get to card number 9, because you're going to have power whiplash where you go, wait. How is number 9 like above number 10? How does that work? Trust me, you'll get what I'm talking about when we get to it. So let's get to it. All right, my friends, we are starting out with BFM. Now, bear in mind, this is not number 15 on the list. This is the honorable mention auto must include when talking about all the biggest creatures in Magic. This is the biggest creature if you include uncards, which we are not for our main list. So let's take a quick look at this guy because he deserves a little bit of respect and a little bit of a chuckle. He is made out of 2 individual rare cards from the first Unglued set. He costs 15 black mana, just an absurd amount. His name is the Big Furry Monster, although we all know that the F in the name would actually stand for something different that Wizards would never actually print on a card. Now, on the creature type line, it says summon the biggest, baddest, nastiest, scariest creature you'll ever see. You must play both BFM cards to put BFM into play. If either BFM card leaves play, sacrifice the other. BFM can only be blocked by 3 or more creatures, so that's like Super Menace. Menace requires 2 creatures. This one's like, no. We're going to do 3, bare minimum, to stop this. And he's so massive that they can only really show the top of his head on one Magic card, you can only fit a quarter of the top of his head. Like that, or I guess a half of the top of his head. It's absolutely amazing in that regard. And the flavor text says it was big, really, really big. No bigger than that. Even bigger. Keep going. More. No, more. Look, we're talking Krakens and Dreadnoughts for jewelry. It was big. And that's a quote that is attributed to Arna Kennerud, the Sky Knight. Now, you will know if you actually take a look at the artwork, you can see as the earrings hanging, traipsed up there on the horns on the top of his head are a Phyrexian Dreadnought and a Polar Kraken. And if you didn't know, those were the 2 biggest creatures in Magic the Gathering at the time the BFM came out, which is, it's pretty crazy that none of those creatures actually made it on to this list. We actually have a minimum that made it so that these guys, I mean, the Phyrexian Dreadnought could technically have made the list, but because we're mentioning them here, I'm kind of leaving them as a side note. If you take a look at the Polar Kraken, you can see the flavor text says it was big, really, really big. No bigger than that. It was big. And that is a quote, again, from Arna Kennerud. So the flavor text on the BFM adds a nice bit of flavor to it. The Phyrexian Dreadnought is a funky card. Both these cards are really funky. I mean, you got the Polar Kraken eating a big old glacier. You've got the Dreadnought, which is just this kind of like endless Phyrexian worm beast that looks just massively destructive. But a nice big taste of Magic the Gathering's past. So I decided to leave the Phyrexian Dreadnought off the top 15. You could technically swap one of the cards that are in here for him if you wanted to. I mean, you got to understand, this list is going to have some personal taste here overall. So, we're basically, the lowest bar is 12 creatures. Number 15 on our list is Joka Mortar. This is 3 blue and 4 for a 12-12 trampler. I mean, if you think about this compared to Polar Kraken, you can see it's already a big step upwards. Polar Kraken was 11 and cost a lot more to put out than this. So, Joka Mortar has trample, comes into play tapped. When Joka Mortar comes into play, sacrifice it unless you sacrifice 5 lands. It doesn't untap during your untap step. Whenever you play an island, you may untap Joka Mortar. So this isn't going to be as awful for your land supply as the Polar Kraken would be. And it's this crazy combination of like sea serpent, leviathan, and a killer whale. Like it's such interesting artwork. Like admittedly, this isn't the absolute best of the best when it comes to these big, fat, beefy creatures, but it's just flavor-wise so interesting that it's this gigantic sea serpent, but it has like almost the feel, you know how like rattlesnakes or cobras? Cobras have those big flaring hoods like along their head. It's got that kind of a vibe to it, and the ridges on its back give it almost like a chainsaw feel. It's got this weird little mouth. It's such a bizarre creature, and you can see it coming to the edge of the water with these like footprints leading away, like it's literally chased somebody through the water and they've needed to like run off. I don't know. There's just something about the artwork on this card that I found really, really striking. I enjoyed it. It's very different, and it does give a sense of immensity too, with those little footprints in front giving you some scale and the glacial wall behind it. There's just a sense of desolation around him. Very, very nice. So that is a perfect fitting number 15. Number 14 is Kozelek the Great Distortion. Now understand, we've got a couple of the Eldrazi are on this list twice. So I've spaced them out. So if you want to, you could theoretically go, well, you know what, number 12 should be above number 12 should actually be 15. However you want to reorder this in your head. In some ways, I had to give it a little leeway so it wouldn't be boring to just talk about Kozelek back to back or something like that. And this is the weaker of the two Kozeleks, in my opinion. It's Kozelek the Great Distortion. He costs 2 colorless and 8. He's a 12/12. When you cast Kozelek the Great Distortion, if you have fewer than 7 cards in your hand, draw cards equal to the difference. He's got Menace, and you can discard a card with converted mana cost X to counter target spell with converted mana cost X. And the flavor text says, avoid as cryptic as reality itself. Now, Kozelek is an insane beast, right? He is one of the 3 major Eldrazi titans, and these are Cthulhu-style horrors. They vary in degree as to how, like, horrific and Cthulhian they feel to me. I feel like Merkel has more of that kind of a vibe. Kozelek definitely has a very unearthly vibe to him, with the fact that like he doesn't really seem to have a head that you can discern, but he's got these gigantic black plates that fly above where his head would be. I mean, they do kind of look like gigantic eyebrows, which is a little bit silly, but look at his hand. You can see his hand reaching out. You see this swirling vortex. That is what I interpret the discard a converted mana cost card to counter a spell with. He's literally warping the reality. Like whatever magic you're casting, he's warping that reality. And you can see like down in the corner, there are little fragments that are kind of breaking away. Like this, the Eldrazi Titans are these big, crazy beasts. And the way that this has been painted, you can see under Kozelek's one arm, there's a drake flying by. But that drake is reduced to something about the size, like it makes you think of something about the size of a seagull or a small bird, when in actuality, this would be a drake that a man would have an easy time using as a mount, right? And so you've got Kozelek standing there, just kind of, not like framed, but enhanced by this empty sky. There's some clouds, but there's no buildings or anything. So it gives Kozelek this towering presence. And Kozelek looks like they're made up out of the same stone, even, of that gigantic stone iceberg that's floating. I don't know, man. This is just some really intense and different artwork. A very cool card. Obviously, considerably powerful compared to the Joka Mortar. It's funny that they're almost on the same list, but like I said at the beginning of the video, just wait till we get to number 9. You're gonna feel a little bit of whiplash at that point in the video, all right? So let us move on to card number 13. That is Ancient Stone Idol. This is a 10 casting cost artifact golem. Now this one's really weird. It's got flash, which you wouldn't think of for like a stone statue, right? Like a stone statue just, pachow, check it out, I just appeared. It's like, but you're like a what? an 80-foot tall stone statue. How do you just appear like that? And the spell costs 1 less to cast for each attacking creature. It's got trample, and when Ancient Stone Idol dies, create a 6/12 colorless construct artifact creature token with trample. So what this card gives me in terms of vibes of the flavor is that this is like an ancient stone trap. So I think that the idea isn't supposed to be so much that it flashes to existence. I think it's more supposed to be one of those gigantic stone statues that stand somewhere guarding. And then when you do the Indiana Jones, like, yo, I stole your idol and left a bag of sand, the statue's like, nuh-uh, son, not on my watch, and instantly wakes up like, get some! And the fact that when the fact that it costs less to cast when you're being attacked by creatures does give it that kind of defensive connotation. You just all of a sudden, surprise, I've got this stone defender. And even if they manage to hack and bash this gigantic hulking 12/12 trampling statue down, you still end up with like a 6/12, which from previous things that we've seen, 6/12 is just like the gigantic animated stone head or something like that. It's just cool that once this thing gets broken into pieces, the pieces are still able to fight. And when you look at the artwork, it's actually really funky. Honestly, it feels like this, after having just looked at Kozelek, this feels like it's actually a statue of Kozelek from the world of Zendikar, because Zendikar had these trap-style scenarios. They also had false religions that were built around the 3 different Eldrazi Titans. So it makes sense to me that this would actually be a statue of Kozelek, especially with the head ornamentation. So, I mean, in terms of the artwork, it's perfectly serviceable. It has a very Dungeons and Dragons style feel where it's like, you're in a cave and there's a waterfall cascading from somewhere up above you. Ahead of you looms this gigantic, battered, weathered, aged statue with an ominous feeling around it. Like, dude, this is some nice high fantasy flavor, and I am a big fan of this style of concept. So that is one of the reasons that it ranks on the list here. The next card we're going to talk about, mega flavorful. In fact, this card got its very own spoiler video when it came out. Like, I have a full video on just this card. And that is Arixmathes Slumbering Isle. That is 1 blue, 1 green, and 2 for a 12/12 legendary Kraken. And Arixmathes Slumbering Isle enters the battlefield tapped with 5 slumber counters on it. As long as Arixmathes has a slumber counter on it, it's a land. It's not a creature. Whenever you cast a spell, you may remove a slumber counter from Arixmathes, and you tap Arixmathes to add a green and a blue mana. So this is a really, really cool concept. The idea of an actual, like, you've got a creature and it's been slumbering for so long that, like, its stony back has been covered in actual life. You've got trees, you've got entire thriving civilizations, essentially. Look, you can see there is a port town nestled on the back. And this is like a big, what is it, like lobster crayfish style kraken? You can see it under the water. The one boat is above like its elbow joint, and you can see that the protrusions coming up out of the water are running along its spine. I mean, the flavor on this is absolutely amazing. I absolutely love it when a Magic card can tell you an entire story all by itself. And this is a calamity waiting to happen. Imagine being the civilization that, like, imagine you live in that city that's on the back of this Kraken. Are you aware of it? And if you are aware of it, what does your civilization do to prevent it from awakening? How do you keep it asleep? Do they constantly throw like tribute into the water so that like food flows into its, like, how much food do they have to feed it to keep it asleep? Will its hunger awaken it? And then it just, boom, swims down under the water, and all life on there is all like, oh no, I can only hold my breath for a few moments. So that's some really heavy flavor. I absolutely love this card. I do have a video on the channel just about it if you want to check it out. So let us move on from card number 12 to card number 11. And that is Ghalta, Primal Hunger. I gotta say, I mean, this one ranks higher on the list just totally from personal bias. I love big, beefy green creatures, specifically mono green. And Galta Primal Hunger falls right into that category. 2 green and 10 for a 12/12 legendary Elder Dinosaur. They just put that Elder on there to give it some extra flavor, which I approve of. Galta Primal Hunger costs X less to cast, where X is the total power of creatures you control. And he says, the flavor text says, the Earth walks strongest of all. It's like Galta Primal Hunger is an avatar of the Earth, and it's easier to draw him out the more powerful creatures that you have. Maybe that's just his, basically like he is like the primal hunger of the plane. So the more creatures you have out makes it easier to summon him because he's hungry and he wants to come and eat everybody. The artwork is not too shabby. I mean, it's not the most mind-blowing artwork. I actually like the temples that are shrouded in the mist in the back there to give you kind of a concept of what Galta is just crushing over. Like you can see Galta moving forwards, kind of there's crushed ruins underneath, and that would be him just smashing down these gigantic temples. And that is some thick flavor right there. In terms of Galta himself, he's just a dinosaur with some racing stripes painted on. So, I mean, the sense of perspective is pretty dope. I like that he's coming out of the shadows into the light, but overall, it's like perfectly serviceable art. Very, very cool card. Number 10, my friends, is Kozelek, Butcher of Truth. 10 mana for a 12/12. This is the other Kozelek, obviously. When you cast Kozelek, Butcher of Truth, draw 4 cards. He's got Annihilator 4, which is an ability it seems like they've just discontinued, probably because it's too powerful and just unfun to deal with. So Annihilator 4, whenever this creature attacks, defending player sacrifices 4 permanents. That's so brutal, because that even includes lands, man. Like, how are you supposed to come back against that? What are you supposed to do? And when Kozelek is put into a graveyard from anywhere, its owner shuffles his or her graveyard into his or her library. So this is obviously tacked on at the end to make it more difficult to use reanimation effects to cheat Kozelek into play, because they don't want that happening. So you can see when you take a look at the artwork, this is Kozelek without the black plates above his head. He has the same sort of body structure as before. His tentacles are located in the bottom. It's all right artwork in terms of making a towering Eldrazi beast, but I mean, it just feels a bit everyday. I don't know, maybe it's because I've looked at like a bunch of big towering creatures for this particular video, but when I look at the artwork, it's obviously done by somebody who's very talented, but it doesn't super excite me. The fact that his tentacles are kind of wrecking up the landscape a bit is pretty good, but overall, I just find myself underwhelmed by the artwork. It works okay. It's okay, but the card itself is really strong. Like this is a really, really strong card. Like the power level of this card is absolutely nuts. And you're about to get whiplashed, boys, because we're moving into number 9. And number 9 is Krosan Cloud Scraper. So remember what I said at the beginning of the video. Here's how it works. The power tier goes like a 12/12 beats an 11/11 automatically. So this 13/13 gets a higher ranking than Kozelek, and it doesn't really deserve it. This is the worst card on the list by such an insane degree. It sticks out like a sore thumb. So 3 green and 7 for a 13/13. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Krosan Cloud Scraper unless you pay 2 green. Yeah, that's right. You have to pay 2 green every turn just to keep it around. Doesn't even have trample. Just a 13/13 for 10 mana. It's a morph though. So you can play it face down for 3 mana as a 2/2, and then all you have to do is pay 9 mana to flip it face up. Just 2 green and 7. So I mean, that's only 12 mana. Dude, you have to pay 12 mana or 10 mana for this gigantic 13/13. Now, admittedly, I mean, this came out in the early 2000s. This is almost 2 decades old. And at the time, I mean, if you were playing with a bunch of little morph donks, then you could swing with them all, and if they blocked wrong, you could be like, surprise, and hit them with the Cloud Scraper. But you'd have to have an insane amount of mana to do it. And the fact that you have to pay 2 mana every turn to keep this beast mutant around makes it just an absolute garbage card, which is unfortunate because the artwork's pretty cool. Like, Ron Spears did a good job with this piece of artwork. You can see this thing is so massive that it's swinging its fist and just uprooting all kinds, like trees and things like that are being uprooted by it swinging its fist. It took another one of its crazy forearms and drove it down into the earth and ripped it straight up. Just check it out. I'm tearing up like entire chunks of the forest in one go. Not just a couple of trees, everything, roots and all. Like entire acres just yanked up with one hand. Look at how beefy boy his arms are. I love gigantic creatures like this. And the term cloud scraper is so evocative and flavorful. Like, this guy looks absolutely massive. He actually looks bigger to me than Kozelek did in the previous artwork. So a very cool looking card, but hands down, like not even close, the absolute worst card that we have on this list by a long shot. So let us move on from this regrettable sadness onto Death's Shadow. So this is 1 black mana for a 13/13. And when you first see that, your brain goes, wait. 1 mana for a 13/13. What's the catch? And the catch is that it gets -X, where X is your life total. So if you play this and you are at 13 life or more, then guess what? This card goes straight to your graveyard. Not so hot under those circumstances. But if you're at low life, like if you're at 1, this is a 12/12 for 1 mana. You know, I mean, obviously being at 1 is a very dangerous position, but still, that's a 12/12 for 1 mana. The flavor text says, the shadow of the candle looms tall, even as its light grows dim. That's got some nice flavor to it. And when we take a look at the artwork, we've got a very interesting concept where you've got this sort of emaciated looking, he looks like a warrior or a rogue, right? But he looks like he's underfed. He's got kind of a pallid look to him. Like, he doesn't look super healthy. And so he's like this Death Shadow is an avatar. It's literally an avatar of death. It is a shadow of death that grows stronger the closer you get to your life being over. So this guy is not in great health. And as a result, he is able to commune with this Death Shadow. It feeds off the fact that he is close to the grave. And you can tell he is linked with it and controlling it, because look at the positioning of his body versus the positioning of the actual avatar. You can see that both of the hands are held in the exact same positioning in both instances. So the guy in front and the shadow behind it have their hands in the exact same positions. Almost like a reverse marionette. Normally the marionette is the bigger one above controlling with the strings. So this is a reverse marionette effect. And I mean, look at the overall nature of this artwork. The world that he is in looks desolate and barren. The rock has kind of flowed up into tusks, or like, it looks like you could be in the mouth of a dragon. It also kind of has the feel of a broken open rib cage. And the Death Shadow itself has a very alien face with 3 sets of horns that also resemble insectile mandibles. And it's got 5 eyes, also much like an insect, giving it like a very unearthly and unnatural kind of feel when you combine that with the humanoid bipedal body that it has. And just even the energy of the sky behind it with the storm and the anger of that red sort of heat behind the clouds. Like, this just looks, this looks like a place where nothing could really survive. It is incredibly evocative and flavorful artwork, I've got to say. This was really, really well done. Moving on to card number 7, we have the first Emrakul, because as I said before, we have multiple instances of a couple of Eldrazi. So this is the first Emrakul. This is Emrakul, the Promised End. 13 mana for a 13/13. Unlucky 13. I like it when a creature has the same casting cost and the same power and toughness. There's something inherently satisfying about that sort of it has like a symmetrical feel to it almost. I think that's how you describe it. Either way, I'm a big fan of that. So the abilities of this card are Emrakul the Promised End costs 1 less to cast for each card type among cards in your graveyard. And that ties into a delirium insanity concept that came along with the world of Innistrad and the Emrakul invasion, right? Started twisting people's minds, and multiple card types being in your graveyard was supposed to represent insanity. And Emrakul brings insanity with her. She is the warper of minds. So, speaking of warping minds, when you cast Emrakul, you gain control of target opponent during that player's next turn. After that turn, that player takes an extra turn. So that's an interesting way of showing the mind warping effects, where it's just like, at first, Emrakul will take over your mind and leave you powerless to her will. You have to do what she wants. But afterwards, you're left almost like infused with additional energy that you can use, and that kind of represents the extra turn. That's a funky concept. Now, that's already crazy. But then you add on the fact that Emrakul is flying, trample, and protection from instants. Like, this card is so busted, she literally got banned when she was in Standard. There was no way around it. Like, this card is too strong. It's a Mind Slaver effect. And a Mind Slaver is an artifact that you have to... All the Mind Slaver does is let you take an opponent's turn. And you have to sacrifice it. And sure, your opponent gets an extra turn afterwards, which they thought maybe would balance it out, but they were totally wrong. I mean, this just sets you up for the win. The extra turn your opponent would get doesn't matter when you beat them before they get that turn. This card is incredibly potent. The flavor text says, an enigma as vexing as life itself. And that makes sense for a mind-breaking Eldrazi. Now, Emrakul really feels like she embodies the Cthulhu horror kind of mythos very much to me. I enjoy the flavor of it. You can see her here kind of lording over this town. Now, it's difficult to see in the artwork on the card. But when you see the full piece of the artwork, you've got Emrakul set against a stormy sky with her massive amount of crazy tentacles flowing out in all kinds of directions, slamming down into buildings. She is lording over this city here that is just pandemonium. You can see in the background the city is actually on fire with curls of black smoke just spiraling up off of the different parts of the city that are burning. You can see in the forefront the epic struggle between the non-converted, non-infected denizens of Innistrad versus the people who have been corrupted by Emrakul. So on the left, you have the regular townsfolk. You've got like grizzled trappers and hunters in their beat-up, dusty clothes. And then on the right hand, you have the same type of individuals, but they have all been corrupted by Emrakul. And that is really well showcased by the one person that's right in the forefront with a ton of Emrakul's tentacle arms coming out of the back. Some of them are like tentacles, but some of them are almost like little arms that end in little hands. So you can see this. You can see that there are like essentially almost an endless sea on one side of corrupted, messed up individuals who have been warped versus the regular townfolk. And these are all people who had lived in the city side by side together. And now they're forced to basically destroy their own neighbors and family members to survive. This is absolute chaos pictured in one card. This is really, really impressive artwork. Honestly, this card is really, really flavorful. And speaking of really flavorful, card number 6 is also a heavy in the flavor department. I absolutely love it. That is Ludwick's Test Subject. This is 1 blue and 1 for a 0/3 lizard creature. And it's interesting it's a lizard creature. We'll come back to that in a moment. So it's got Defender, pay 1 blue and 1, put a hatchling counter on Ludwick's Test Subject. Then if there are 5 or more hatchling counters on it, remove all of them and transform it. Now it's interesting to note that this, in most cases, you think would be an egg creature in Magic, right? Because there are a number of eggs. We actually talked about that recently in a spoiler video where we were talking about how another egg will be coming in the Ikoria set. So we've got a situation where you would think at first, well, why wouldn't this be summon egg instead of summon lizard, right? Like what is the deal behind that? And I think the reason they chose to not make it an egg is the eggs usually trigger their abilities when they go to the graveyard, versus this one wouldn't trigger anything if it went to the graveyard. You have to successfully get 5 or more hatchling tokens on it. So when we take a look like closer at the artwork, you can see the egg here in the forefront, and it is like suspended above a old rustyish looking gear that has blue energy emanating, sort of probably most likely, it gives me like a lightning magic feel. So you've got lightning magic kind of arcing up out of this gear. At the same time, you have 2 sets of electro spikes that are jammed into either side of the egg that are also feeding energy into this. So every time you pay mana to put a hatchling counter on it, you could consider this as sort of like, all right, that's infusing more energy into it. And you can see around the egg that there are a number of shadowy figures. These are your dark mages, your alchemists. Honestly, the whole vibe of this, if you look at that giant window there, it gives the feel of being in the bottom of something like a church, a cathedral, some sort of fortress or a mansion where somebody has like a big estate and a lot of money, and they're carrying on like Dr. Frankenstein style experiments in their basement. So you have these shadowy figures that are all around this egg that's being infused with energy. They're working on creating some sort of life, right? That is the goal here. And I really love the way this turns out, because this is a flip card. So once you get the 5 tokens, counters, I should say, and flip it over, then you get Ludwick's Abomination. And this is a completely different beast. You go from 0-3 to 13-13 trample. And I've got to say, 13-13 trample for blue is pretty rare. I mean, you don't get a lot of big blue beef, and usually when you do, it comes with stupid drawbacks like the Joka Mortar or the Polar Kraken. So Ludwick's Abomination, once you get it to its lizard horror side, there's no downside. This thing's a beast. The flavor text says, after several frustrating experiments, the visionary Ludwick realized he needed to create a monster that fed on torch-wielding mobs. I mean, think about it. You solve 2 problems in one go in that scenario. 1, you don't have to worry about paying to feed your monster. And 2, you don't have those mobs knocking at your door anymore because he ate them all. Now, the artwork is absolutely awesome for the transform side, because you can see that the mages, these dark mages, were successful in what they tried to do, but it did not turn out the way they wanted to. In the forefront, you can see the egg now. It's shattered, it's cracked, and you can see some sort of like green ichor leaking off of it. There is no more magical energy flowing into it, presumably because the mages providing that energy aren't able to do so anymore. So it is cold and inert on that table now, and you can see the actual Abomination quite clearly in the artwork has gone berserk, right? It has ended the existence of all but one, and most of all, I mean, let's be real, like everybody involved in this, their lives are over. They traveled with things that they shouldn't. You can see the crumpled, broken forms of them on the stairs. The splatter of where that one guy's head hit the wall is right there. You can see that the Abomination literally has one of the mages in his hand as he's going on a rampage, just drool, just splorping out of the mouth. I almost don't have the words to describe it. Just this demonic, almost frog lizard beast. It is going crazy. It has smashed its hand into that gigantic support beam. You could actually see this rampage resulting in the destruction of the entire building. I mean, if you look up at the top of the artwork, you can see what looks like dust and rocks breaking off as it goes nuts. Like, this is so flavorful. I absolutely love it. I love the flavor of this list. Number 5, again, we're going in hard with the flavor, and this is a transforming card. We're going to be looking at Elbrus the Binding Blade. Now, at first look, you go, wow, this card doesn't look so hot. 7 mana to cast for a legendary equipment, and it only gives +1/+0? Sure, it only costs 1 to equip, but it only gives +1/+0. That's nothing. No first strike, no trample. Like, what's the deal? And then you read the part that says, when a creature deals combat damage to a player, you unattach the equipment and transform it. Well, if I got to spend all that mana, the transformation better be good. And it sure is. But before we talk about that, let's take a look at the artwork on this side of the card, because it's absolutely amazing. Super flavorful. This is a demon trapped inside of this blade, right? The flavor text even says, those who grasp its hilt soon hear the demon's call. So you've got the grip, the hilt, the handle of this blade, and it's got these grooves in it for each of your individual fingers. Like it's basically telling you exactly where to place your hands. But the ridges in between give it kind of almost like a knuckle bone feel. The whole thing looks like it's actually carved out of a giant bone. And you have what looks like demon's eyes carved into it, and all these little scratches and lines. Some of them look like arcane symbols. Some of them look like the ravings of a madman. And this blade has been dropped onto the cobblestones alongside the victim of the blade, and there is some blood smeared along the edge of the blade. And this is the moment right before the demon that's inside breaks loose. And that's when you get within Gar Unbound. No longer trapped in the blade, you get the full majesty of this legendary demon. He is a 13/13 flying intimidate trampler. That is absolutely insane. Whenever a player loses the game, put 13 +1/+1 counters on Within Gar Unbound. So clearly he's designed for multiplayer, and you can see that just from the side when he's in the equipment. You can put that on one of your creatures, slam anyone in a multiplayer game who's open, because there's usually somebody open. Give him a little poke-poke-a-rooney, and now you've got this demon out there. And every time he wipes out one of your opponents, he basically, the first time it happens, he doubles in size to a 26/26. Then he's a 39/39. That sort of obtuse growth is amazing. He just feeds off of the soul of a planeswalker and becomes immensely stronger. The flavor text says, there are not enough lives on Innistrad to satisfy his thirst for retribution. He is so angry about being imprisoned in that blade that he intends to wipe out all life to make them pay. That's intense. What else is intense is the sheer scope of him. When you look at the artwork, you can see that he is standing in a city right now, and the tallest buildings only come up to his waist. He is so gigantic that his wing is causing a statue to crumble without him even noticing. That's absolutely insane. It almost looks like the tips of the horns on his head are stuck up in the clouds. He's just this massive beast. How would you stop this demon? Who originally was able to bind this demon into the blade? This is such a vicious looking demon with the crazy like fangs that he has in the middle of his torso and that exposed red looking flesh. Like, oh, he's just so vicious. And look at the size of his mouth, like with the scope of him. How big would that actually be? You'd be able to see him from miles away. That would be terrifying. Let's be real, man. Let's move on to something that makes me a little bit happier. Let's go talk about number 4, which is a big, fat, green boy, green represent, World Spineworm. So this is 3 green and 8, 11 mana. We're talking a hefty mana cost. But unlike that jank bag, the Cloud Scraper, the World Spineworm is worth the cost. So you pay 11 mana, you get a 15/15 trampler. That's 15/15, man. Hitting someone for 15 is taking 75% of their life away if they're at 20 in one hit. That is awesome. It's got trample, which creatures this big should have trample. It just feels right, you know? 15/15 trample. Although I do understand why in some cases they don't add trample for balancing issues, but it just feels right when a creature's that big for it to have trample. 15/15 trample. When the world sperm... Whoa, whoa. No. I did not say that. I'm just going to move on. When World Spine Worm dies, put 3 5/5 green worm creature tokens with trample onto the battlefield. That would be a completely different meaning. I almost said it. I wonder, you know how you'll say something and you think you catch yourself and then you haven't actually caught yourself, like that time I at one of my jobs, I swore at a customer but thought that I didn't. I got in trouble for that. If you back up the video, you might be able to figure out what I was going to say. I'm guessing there'll be multiple comments in the comment section about it. But that's all right. We're keeping it lively. So, when this guy goes, you get 3 5/5 green worm creature tokens. How amazing is that? It segments into like multiple small worms, like they lived inside of them. They're like, Mama, no! Like Bambi, but with worms. And when World Spineworm is put into a graveyard, shuffle it into its owner's library. So, dude, it's like this immortal worm. Every time you destroy it, it spews out little worms and it's like, I'll be back. And when you take a look at the artwork, look at the immensity of this thing, man. In the backdrop, you can see like a misty or foggy day in Innistrad. All the little spires of Innistrad all over the place. And this worm has just burst up from under the surface of the plane. You can see rocks raining down everywhere. And if you look closely at this weird worm, you can see that it's opened its mouth, and in its mouth there's a worm that's sticking out. And inside that worm, there's another worm sticking his head out. It's like, take a peek, son. Oh, Junior, look out the window. And by window, I mean my mouth. So basically, when the World Spine worm dies, these other worms crawl out from inside of it, and the rest of the worm just melts away into the earth and reforms as the World Spine worm. Like, is it actually the literal spine of Ravnica? Is this some essential primordial creature that will always exist in Ravnica? It's such absolutely cool flavor, honestly. A really, really dope card, and it deserves to be at number 4. Let's move on to number 3 and talk about the second Emrakul, which is actually the first Emrakul. This is the first Emrakul that was ever printed. It is 15 mana for a 15/15. So again, doing that sort of fun thing that I like, where the casting cost and the power and toughness are equaled out. I'm down with that. This is actually the one where we get that 15 people combating Emrakul with 15 squirrels. Take her down. So Emrakul's 15/15 can't be countered. When you cast this spell, take an extra turn after this one. Flying, protection from colored spells. That's just insane. Protection from colored spells protects from so much removal. And then you've got Annihilator 6. Every time you attack with Emrakul, your opponent has to sacrifice 6 permanents. Like, how stupid is that? And again, this Emrakul has the same clause we saw earlier on Kozelek that says, when it goes to the graveyard, shuffle it into your deck instead, right? That's the deal. So this is obviously an incredibly powerful card. Like, this is, and dummy thick, right? I mean, I know the kids like that term, right? Did I do it right, children? So this Emrakul is just, it looks like, I don't know, man. This one looks less intimidating than Emrakul the Promised End, and that's probably because we're not seeing like Emrakul influencing a massive amount of humanity and warping them. You're only seeing Emrakul in this artwork corrupting the lands around. There's this effect that the Eldrazi have on actual lands as well, and Emrakul is exerting that effect. This is, like, I think when this artwork first came out, this was the most alien-looking thing to me. And I don't mean alien like outer space aliens. I just mean alien as in so insanely different. Like, just look at the artwork. Like, you got that pink mass in the middle that feels kind of like a brain that's split, and you've got all these tentacles that are flowing out, but some of them are turning into black arms, and it's just, it is some absolutely insane artwork. I really dig it. It's colorful and engaging, but it doesn't feel as impressive or foreboding as the other Emrakul artwork, but that's fine. I mean, you do have a tiny little guy down at the bottom for scale in the artwork, which is kind of neat. So, not too shabby. Let's move on to number 2. And this is actually the card I was thinking of when I said I understand why they don't give all big creatures trample. Impervious Great Worm. 3 green and 7 for another big fat greeny boy. This is 16/16 indestructible with Convoke. So you can basically reduce the cast cost of this by tapping creatures. So you get to drop the cost by 1 for every creature that you tap. It says the ultimate answer to intrigue and subtlety. I really like the artwork on this. You have it sheathed in Celestian armor, which really is completely unnecessary because there's nothing can destroy this. Like the scale of this beast, we only get to see its head in the artwork. You get no view of its body whatsoever. Its head is towering up above. You can actually see some poor little unfortunate individual on the walkway in front of it. But it's all mouth. It has no eyes even. Look at how many teeth it has. It has multiple rows of jagged, protruding teeth in all kinds of different directions. It has a tongue that would be the size of a sea serpent. Like, this thing is just massive. I love it. Look at the little air balloon that's over floating beside his head. Look at everything for a sense of scale. Enormity. This is 1616. Like, how are you supposed to beat a 1616? How do you get any bigger than that? Well, I know what you're saying. Well, it's number 2. There has to be something bigger than that. And you're right. Let us move on to the ultimate. It all starts with dark depths and something under the ice. All right? So, this is a legendary snowland. Okay, what's going on here? It's dark depths. Comes into play with 10 ice counters on it. Pay 3 mana, remove an ice counter from dark depths. All right? When dark depths has no ice counters on it, sacrifice it. If you do, put an indestructible, legendary 2020 black avatar creature token with flying named Merkel into play. Now, when you take a look at the artwork, you can see there is a lone traveler going out along the ice. But under the ice, you can see a bunch of eyeballs. You can see tentacles kind of spreading out. And in the bottom corner, you can actually see what looks almost like a skeletal hand reaching up. Imagine traveling across the ice, or more importantly, flying over the ice and seeing this. The fact that you can see it through the ice means it's getting closer to the surface, right? The ice has to be receding. And Merkel, let's take a look at the token, then we'll talk about what Merkel is. Merkel, the token, is a 2020 flying indestructible beast. And this is actually Magic's first attempt at bringing like the Cthulhu concept in a real and noticeable way to Magic the Gathering. So the Eldrazi and Emrakul specifically were the second attempt by a different creative group, but this was the first attempt. And when you take a look at the artwork from this token, like, look at this, you can see that same individual, I assume it's the same individual. Maybe it's a story where this individual found Merkel under the ice, found a way to free them, and is now facing them down. But there's this crazy, again, this very alien feel to this one. Shrouded by mists or other kind of mystical energy, just crazy bending limbs in all kinds of directions. You can see the skeletal hand off to the side. All the eyes that we saw under the water are now lit up, staring like these light beacons. It's absolutely intense, man. I remember the first time I saw the 2020 token. There's just something gut-punching about seeing a creature that can take a player out in one hit. Are you at full life? Are you like 20? Are you at 20 life right now? It doesn't matter. I have thawed out a Cthulhu horror that I found trapped in an iceberg, and I'm going to use it to destroy you. First your sanity, and then your physical form. That is just absolutely amazing. The best choice for number 1, hands down. I absolutely love it. I'm very curious as to what you guys would order these to be. All right, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. All right, and now on the screen we can see a list of my top patron supporters. Honestly, when it comes to making videos like this, they take a fair bit of time and editing. There's a lot that goes into them. I genuinely appreciate the support of my patrons. You should get on board with that now. In the meantime, over on the side here, got a couple of options for you, things to check out. You can go and check out another channel that I have where me and my lovely lady eat funny and fun and sometimes awful treats. And there's the other option of going and checking out her channel where she is doing fantastic game reviews. All right, she did one on this Tango of Death. That's not what it's called, but you'll find out when you go. It's Tango of Death, but it's a different name, kind of. Anyways, you can go and check that out because I'm in the video too. And at the end of the day, it's all about me.